campaign, the effort we call the India FDI Watch campaign. I don't know where you want to start, but it's been 5 or 6 years on this fight, and it has to do with Walmart, Carrefour, Metro, all the big multi-brand, multinational companies that have made it a huge priority to break into India, and we and others have been sort of building the dike to keep them out. But I don't know where you want to start, but some history of the campaign, and then let's move to where we are now.
Before that, I would like to say that India is seen as a land of retail democracy, and we have the largest number of people doing retail. We have largest number of shops, and the density of shop is also highest in India. We have 11 outlets on 1,000 population, which is highest in the world. So we basically see the superstores, as popularly termed, or allowing giant corporations like Walmart of US, or Carrefour from France, or Metro from Germany, or Tesco from UK.
Exactly.
In doing retail as a question of livelihood. It was a question of livelihood of not thousands or not tens of thousands, but a question of 40 million poor Indians. For retail is seen as some kind of refuge for those who cannot find any other opportunity of livelihood.
Exactly.
So people end up doing retail if they are unable to find any other means of livelihood. So we were talking of poor people, we were talking of women, we were talking of rural people, we were basically talking of distressed people doing retail.
Exactly.
And suddenly the giants, including Walmart, started taking interest into the retail trade of India. And we did not have corporations doing retail even in India. By that time, I'm talking about 2000 or 2001 or 2, we hardly had any big corporations, any chain retail here. 96% of the stores are still smaller than 500 square feet,
Right.
and 76% of the Indian shops are still run by families. So it was a question of big retail versus people's retail. It was a question of corporate retail
Exactly.
versus independent retail. It was a question of the wealthiest family and the poorest family of the world competing with each other. There was a concern, I think there was a genuine concern on threat of livelihood. So we started a campaign to stop entry of Walmart, Tesco, Carrefour, Metro, and even the Indian corporations, Reliance, Future Group, Tata, Birla, from coming into the retail trade without strict regulations.
Exactly.
And we still have a very strong and vibrant campaign not to allow them to compete with the traditional retailers, street vendors, hawkers, or independent people who are part of the supply chain, without making sure that they protect the existing livelihood, they protect the communities, and they protect the ecology. So unless the communities, livelihood, the ecology is protected, we will have our struggle to make sure that these corporations are kept at bay.
And part of this goes back to the history of the colonial struggle in India. I mean, this is almost part of the independence movement. And we talk about a Quit Walmart campaign. So many of the aspects of neoliberalism over the last, 10, 20 years in India have allowed FDI or foreign direct investment to come in. Multi-brand retail is one of the last, insurance and banking other than that, one of the last holdouts to wholesale foreign entry into the country. What's the history of all that?
The colonialism is in memory, and it's not a distant history. And interestingly, it was not a country which colonized India, but it was only a company, East India Company, belonging to United Kingdom, which came here for trade only. And in the process of doing merchandise, doing trade in India, within years they captured the whole country, and we were kept under foreign rule for more than 200 years.
It's a long time.
And only some time back we celebrated our 62nd Independence Day. So we are a new independent country. But for the last 10 years, following the new liberal regime, that independence is under challenge through various means. And one of the means is to make the Indian economy dependent on foreign players. I am not saying that we are against foreign direct investment or we are against big capital. Capital is required for development. Foreign direct investment could also do goods for a domestic economy if it is well regulated. But if we
That's been our issue, is regulation and supervision, and
So-
too often the Indian government has tended to say, just come in and do whatever you want around this thing.
Exactly. So in the case of retail also, if there is a big capital bringing in new technology or going to add new jobs or trying to expand your production base, then it could be thought of. But in retail, it is neither going to bring in new technology nor going to add any new jobs, or it is not a question of expanding the production capacity of India. So we still believe that retail, insurance, pension, these are sensitive sectors, and the state must trade cautiously before allowing giants like Walmart.
Furthermore, there's a huge division between the federal proposals here and some of the state governments about how to look at these issues.
There is a great debate going on, and it's high on the agenda of all the political parties and governments whether they should allow foreign direct investment in retail or not. Recently, there was a decision by the government of India to allow FDI in multi-brand retail up to 51%.
When was that?
It came in November 2011, last year. So it was allowed for million plus cities, which roughly means 53 million. So it was a free run for the corporations to open as many stores of whatever sizes they wish. So it was highly unregulated.
No protection for livelihoods.
No protection for
No
livelihood.
protection for communities of that size,
Yeah.
many of which can't really physically handle a superstore within the geographical structure of the neighborhoods either.
Yeah, so it was highly unprotected policy measure, which was fiercely debated and opposed by many states, including the states run by allies of the central government. So most of the Indian states still are not in favor of FDI in multi-brand retail.
And part of our strategy, if you will, has been to make sure that the states have a strong voice in whatever changes develop on FDI.
Yeah, under Indian Constitution, states have a space to formulate their own policy on agriculture and retail. So the government of India should not threaten that policy space that the states have. So we have been saying since day one that the states should finally decide what kind of stores they want and what kind of retail they want to establish.
And at different times over this campaign, some states have expressly banned big box development, superstore development with
The
Walmart.
largest state of India, Uttar Pradesh,
Right.
has been the largest company of India, Reliance, from opening retail stores in their states. Then we had other states like Kerala, Rajasthan, which had imposed restrictions and has expressed their concerns on the issue and has been repeatedly saying that they will not allow big corporations doing retail.
So this is a campaign and a fight that even at this point, 6 years later, is still very robust and vital.
It's very vital and it's as critical as it was, and I think it's a real challenge for the society and the government to take a decision in favor of the people, in favor of the ecology, in favor of the community, and this is the right time to decide what kind of future distributional change they want to create for their people.
When the government proposed the change, what happened in Parliament last November?
When
It's kind of a stalemate, wasn't it?
When the government took the decision of allowing FDI in multi-brand retail, it was not only the opposition which opposed that decision, but it was members of the government, the parties which were supporting the government, and in some cases even the members of parliament belonging to the ruling party opposed the government decision, and there was almost a unanimous demand in the parliament and unanimous demand also in the streets from the people of India, from traders, from street vendors, from consumers, from cooperatives, from producers, from farmers, that this decision should be rolled back.
Right.
And the government had to listen to the people's voice and people's representatives' voice, and finally after 21 days of the decision, the parliament could function only after the government announcement that government will put it on hold.
I have to tell the story of during that period, obviously in the West, in the United States, the big papers, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, were trumpeting this governmental fiat announcement that FDI was now going to be wide open in multi-brand retail, as Walmart stock was going to go up. I mean, this was finally done. And as you remember, you were emailing me, no, Parliament's in a stalemate, nothing's happening, there's demonstrations. So I'm writing on my little blog, hey, this thing is not over. Meanwhile, a week later, 10 days later, finally in the press in the United States, they're having to say, whoops, there's a stalemate. And that's the 21-day period you're talking about, where no business happened in government. I mean, that was the stalemate, is that the government couldn't get anything out of Parliament at all, could they, Dharmendra?
No, it was a historical moment in Indian parliamentary democracy, because this is only a policy decision which government has all powers to undertake, and parliament hardly has any role to play. Despite this limitation, the parliament did come up in time to say that when it matters to the livelihood of the people, when it matters to the people's right to livelihood, the parliamentarians, the representatives will not go to the government and can even go up to the challenge of, up to the extent of challenging the government, and if needed, the constitution could also be amended, and such decisions should be taken only after a general agreement or consensus, or having state governments and political parties on board. Government has realized that without doing so, they cannot exercise their power. And
So it's almost a parliamentary protest organization. And the stalemate was finally broken by the government rolling back that policy, right?
The stalemate was finally broken by the formal announcement in both houses of parliament, upper house as well as the lower house, of suspending the decision and government committing to try to evolve a consensus and consult all political parties and all state governments on the issue before revisiting that.
Which means suspending, they didn't exactly take it back, but this could come up any time now in the future again.
There is a process of consultation going on, and the consultation process has already taken place with us, with other stakeholders, with farmers, and government is trying to force a consensus on its allies. So let's see how politics take its shape, but we still have our fight on, and it's, as you said, it's still not over.
Your speculation was these next couple of months, June, July, even August, could be very important in what happens on the FDI fight for multi-brand retail.
Yeah, my perception is so, because this is June and July and Parliament is not sitting. It's only sitting after that. So government have a time where it is not going to face the parliamentarians. And government is also feeling heat on the front of performance of economy. The GDP of India, which touched almost 9.5% in 2008, is now down to even the levels of 5.3. So this is a real concern for the government and for the economy. The foreign direct investment flow, on which the government whole model of development banks is also declining.
Yeah.
The other aspect is that government is also defensive on corruption charges, like the corruption charges that started coming up from Commonwealth Games. It only exaggerated, and now there are a series of scams involving billions of US dollars. Like 2G scam, when the government allotted a spectrum for telecom authorities. Now we have a lot of other scams coming up, and there is a strong movement, people's movement going on for a strong regulations or act which could check these corruption at high levels or even lower levels in the administrative setup. So government is under tremendous pressure to perform. The corporate sector is accusing the government of policy paralysis, that government has not been able to take steps or measures. So government is under pressure to perform on all these fronts, and FDI retail is one of the leading front where government could take an decision.